Welcome everyone to the Facilities Committee meeting for June 18th, 2025. We're starting promptly at 6:02. Mr. Hollis, will you take roll to establish
quorum? Yes, Chair Batchelor. On the roll call for the Facilities Committee meeting, or Facilities Committee special meeting for June 18th, 2025. Director Barry?
Present.
Director Thompson?
Here.
Chair Batchelor?
Here.
Quorum present.
Thank you, and thank you for the reminder that this is a special board meeting, because our board meeting would have been tomorrow, which is a joyous celebration, which is Juneteenth, and that's what we had to change it, and I appreciate my board colleagues for shifting their schedules to make this happen. So now we are on the first item, which is item C1 25-0103, Facilities Committee OUSD 2025, Facilities Master Plan Update, Facilities Planning Management. Do we have a presentation?
Yes. Good evening, committee. My name is Pranita Ranbise, Director of Facilities Planning. This item is related to our 2025 Facilities Master Plan. It's a quarterly update that we have been coming back to you all in the community to talk about the progress we've made so far with our Facilities Master Plan, where we are with the process, what are some of our preliminary findings, and then just to talk about next steps. Just as a refresher, the Facilities Master Plan is a long-term planning document for our OUSD district-wide facilities that we update every 5 years. It's meant to be a roadmap as you're thinking through what facility investments need to be made, what projects need to be planned. It informs our bond spending plan, our just generally aligning our district priorities with what we're seeing in terms of our facilities. So all of our presentations, we start off with our OUSD vision and mission, just to ground our conversation and our discussions around how we're best serving our student, staff, and community. We have also been bringing our facilities mission statement just to kind of outline as a department what are some of our focus areas and what our mission is as it aligns with the OUSD's mission and vision. So just a little bit about the project process and a high-level overview. As I mentioned, it's a district-wide initiative. We are, as part of the Facilities Master Plan development, also aligning the development process with several other district initiatives, one of them being the re-envision, redesign, restructuring, but also some of our ongoing efforts with updating our existing policies or developing existing procedures and standards. So we've outlined some of those initiatives of how we're making sure all of these are aligned. In terms of the holistic understanding of what the development process looks like, it's essentially threefold. One, you're looking at your schools, and at the school level, looking at enrollment, looking at long-term projections for enrollment, your facility conditions or the physical conditions of our facilities, the educational adequacy, which is a new effort that has not been incorporated in the previous master plan, but it's a new effort that we're trying to bring through this master planning process, space utilization, and then program distribution across the district. Also looking at ensuring that we're looking at who we're serving and the demographics at each of these facilities. And then ensuring that we are actively listening and taking feedback from our community, from our students, and from our staff across the development of the master plan. And then, as I mentioned, just continuing to look at all of the other district-wide initiatives and policies and procedures that we have. This just gives you an outline of where we are with the process. As you can see in the box in gray, that's where we are. That's where we started with the data collection and data gathering. Keep going.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the next step was to engage on general visioning of, oh, no problem. There we go. So the first one was our data collection and just collecting all of our, conducting all of our assessments, bringing together all of the data for enrollment, for programs, and then having active listening sessions to just gauge overall vision that we as a district want to have for our facilities. And then there's an analysis phase where we're looking at what the data is telling us, what the feedback has been through engagement, and then continuing to refine the priorities that we're seeing. Throughout the process, again, there's a level of touch base with you all as a committee, with the community, with students to share what our findings are and continue to refine those priorities. And then bring to you all a draft plan in terms of what the 5-year roadmap may look like for facilities. With that, I will pass it on to Gavin D'Souza, our partners who are helping us with the development of the facilities master plan.
Thank you, Pranitha. So in terms of our overall engagement efforts, we've conducted a series of workshops and interviews with a variety of constituents. I think a couple of months ago, we were here in terms of getting your feedback in terms of really identifying the values and priorities for the district. And some of the common themes that we've heard come up so far is there's a real desire in terms of establishing and developing a sense of equity and transparency in the overall planning process, and then also being able to address the infrastructure issues that are prevalent across the various facilities in the district. There was also a strong urge and a desire from everyone in terms of putting students first, so creating high quality learning spaces for them, giving them access to the latest of technology within their classroom and in their experiences during the school, but also creating a safe space on their school campuses. So that was one of the priorities that really came up through our engagement sessions. In addition to that, there was also the desire to create supportive spaces for staff to collaborate with each other and also learn from each other. So creating spaces for that, and then also investing in schools in such a way so that it positions itself as the center of within a community or for a family, so that the school really serves as a center and a nexus for it, but also investing schools in such a way that it helps support future enrollment growth. So those were the priorities that we heard from our interviews and workshops that we've had. In addition to that, we also have a survey that is still active. We've used a variety of means in terms of reaching out to people to take the survey. It is also available in addition to being a digital survey, is also physical copies have also been distributed to just try to get as many people to take it. And so far, we have about 461 responses as of right now. And parents have made up like the largest contributors in terms of taking the survey. And some of the emerging priorities so far have been the condition of the facilities, and sometimes also specifically the HVAC within the various buildings, the condition of restrooms, looking at outdoor spaces, and then modernizing classrooms. So those have been like the emerging priorities so far. In terms of looking at where these responses have come so far, almost about 60% of our responses have come from districts 1 and 4. So there is some work that we need to do in terms of making sure we get more voices across the overall district. This survey is still open and active, and we are going to use the start of the upcoming school year to really try get some engagement and make sure this is more representative across.
Can you go back one slide? I just want to lift up a couple of things. One, the overrepresentation of white families in participating in the surveying data, I think is just a really critical piece as we hold equity at the center of it. Like, how do we create strategies to engage, to get the demographics? And I just want to lift this up because these are some of the things that I would like for feedback from the board around this engagement. And you could see that this is definitely something that in the slide that Ms. Ramsey showed was we're in the very beginning of the community engagement piece, right? So we've launched some engagement. There is a window coming back into the fall, and we're really looking forward to other strategies that we can utilize to engage families across all of our schools. So that's something that I would love for you all to just like kind of provide guidance and feedback for us of strategies that you think will help engage with the various different communities. But if you could go forward to the next slide. This one also highlights where we're getting representation from each district individually. And we'll be reaching out over the summer to individual directors around strategies that we can utilize in each of their districts to get the word out and to get more feedback. And so, you know, it was in a, you know, time of the year when it coincided towards the end of the year, school year, where there's lots of things going on. But I really just wanted to highlight these two slides that we're going to keep bringing this data back to you all in terms of how we're progressing around the outreach and who we're hearing from and what can we do better to engage. And this is historically, this isn't just a Measure Y issue. If you go back to the previous master plans, getting community engagement across the board, across the entire city has been an ongoing challenge with any master plan. And so I just want to lift that up for you all. And I think, you know, we're going to keep bringing the data to you all so there's a lot of clarity about where the information's coming from. Thank you.
So 2 slides ago, I kind of shared like some of the emerging themes or priorities that have come up so far through our surveys. And also, we're not just looking at it from an aggregate lens. We, you know, parents have taken the survey, staff have taken the survey, students have taken a survey. So really trying to like break it down and understand what are the priorities from these different groups. So for example, this is just like current information. So people might have taken the survey, so it might have been updated, or you know the survey is still active. But everyone kind of have prioritized issues related to infrastructure reliability as their highest priority. But staff and students prioritized modern classrooms higher over outdoor spaces, whereas parents have prioritized in the opposite way. So there is some differences. So we are kind of mindful and looking at it from that perspective as we drill into meaningfully using this data. But just zooming out at a high level, a lot of the priorities that have come up so far and are already aligned and reflect the investments that the district is undertaking into its various schools through the bond funding and the various categories that it has. So there is already some alignment, and there's so it is more, it's not undoing or redoing a lot of the work that is being done, but just really building on it. As part of the survey, we had like specific questions targeted towards students. We asked them what are their favorite spaces on campus were, what were their least liked spaces, and why. And like this word cloud kind of illustrates it, but students really cared about the quality of their restrooms, being comfortable both inside and outside their classrooms from a thermal or like a personal comfort perspective, and then access to modern and safe spaces in terms of classrooms. So those are the really key things that students so far who have taken the survey have provided, like in terms of what they value. As Preston kind of mentioned, we're trying different ways of making sure we get representative voices. So we had like those interviews, we have the survey, but we also conducted a series of town halls early in May. We also had a session a couple of days ago in terms of sharing some of the information, but also trying to get some feedback. And those town halls really focused on 2 core questions. What improvements in facilities would be made or could be made to better support a student holistically? So looking at it from an academic perspective, looking at it from an emotional and social emotional perspective. So that was one question that we asked the attendees to provide some feedback on. And then the second question that we asked them was, what investments in programs would better support their school community? So those are the 2 questions that we really focused in terms of getting feedback from, but also engaging in conversations about the whys as well. So in terms of like what facilities improvements, again, like everyone seems pretty aligned in terms of like it aligns with our interviews, workshops, as well as surveys. Like even in these sessions, like people are concerned and want to prioritize HVAC, accessibility within the campuses, modernized classroom, safety, infrastructure, and support spaces in terms of serving a student holistically. So those have been like the key focus areas that people have kind of highlighted. And then in terms of programs, what people have really focused in terms of focusing in terms of investments were early childhood programs, visual and performing arts and music, investing in programs for special education, and then also supporting more of the student support services that are offered on campus. So those have been, like, from a programmatic perspective, some of the key areas that they have highlighted. I will say this, just because in terms of timing, this is particularly represented from elementary and middle school communities. We did have a high school focus session recently, and we just because in terms of board submission deadlines, we weren't able to incorporate that data. So during our next session, we'll be able to share other priorities. And I think just underscoring that this is ongoing effort, and we will share updates with all of this information as we make progress and hear more voices. With that, I'll pass it on to Preston.
And do you want us to pause after this section, or would you like us to go through and just take rounds of questions at the end? Okay.
Rounds of questions at the end.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay. So we talked about survey data that we're getting from the community and engaging the community. We're also doing assessments of each of our buildings. And it's not just this master plan assessment that we're doing, where there are teams that are actually going out to school sites and doing the assessments. We're also meeting in partnership with our buildings and grounds team that are doing the maintenance on it to triangulate all the data that we're getting from different places that'll be incorporated into this. And so we're definitely going deep around the assessments that we're doing. And this is the preliminary building conditions. And one of the things that I would just point out, each of those is by board district. So you see District 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And I just really want you to focus on the green. Green is excellent or good. And that means that the facilities across the board at the site meet that criteria, right? And you can see that there's a lot of work that we need to do across our district. And in the previous master plan, there was about $3.4 billion worth of need across our facilities. And you can see how that's represented and probably lives to your experience within your own district. So, Director Barry, in District 5, you see that there's a high green bar, but that's also where Fremont is, right? So that is a school that has recently been invested in and meets kind of a good or an excellent standard, right? Why isn't it excellent yet? Because there's still parts of the campus that weren't done, and there's a lot of these partial campuses that are done. In District 7, there are several schools that are relatively new schools that were in several past bonds that were whole campuses. Those are the campuses that you're seeing there. But in general, notice how many poor and deficient campuses we have, and that's about 36% of our district facilities. Also, actually, I'm going to turn it over to Pranita because she actually started this work, and we're incorporating this into the master plan around our portables.
Sure. As you can see, we have approximately 475, I would say, portables across the district. There's a section that you see those bars that are the highest in the graph. What those really mean is a typical life cycle of a portable is approximately 20 to 25 years. And you see a huge spike in portables that are beyond the life cycle. So a large part of a student, I would say about 70%, are actually in aging portables. What that means is the conditions of these portables are deteriorating or definitely need some investments in terms of remodeling those, whether that's portable replacement or just addressing some immediate needs. But it just highlights the fact that we need to focus our attention on addressing some of these larger facility investments as we're thinking of where our students are and what kind of spaces our students are.
And one of the things actually that's really interesting about this that coincides, do you know why there is a peak? I'm asking this somewhat rhetorically because I'll answer it myself, but in 25, 30-year-olds portables, that is when Oakland Unified School District was at its peak of enrollment. When I came into the district in 1995, 96, that is when we were reaching our peak, and we were dropping portables all over the district. Those portables are coming to the end of their lifespan, and now we're starting to have to do repairs or even in some cases removal of those portables. So just this kind of, there is a story that also goes with the enrollment of the district around why there are so many portables there and why they're aging. And that final category, you know, there's 54 portables that are over 40 years old, right? Those are long-standing portables. Finally, like one of the things that Perkins Eastman is doing, and this is, the slide has a lot of information. I just really want to just kind of narrow in on, yeah, no, it's super confusing, and we might pull it and find a different way to present it. But these are some of the other like investments that you have in a campus, like gardens, libraries, football, like whether you have a football field, whether you have pool access, soccer spaces, baseball, all of those things. So it's a lot of the things, the sports and the extracurricular things that you see. And this is like kind of an equity analysis where they're going district by district to show, and you can see like District 4 in particular doesn't have a lot of things in the middle because it's a district that mostly has elementary and middle schools, right? But what it also means is in that area, it's mostly like soccer, pool, you know, baseball, football. They don't have access to those within those neighborhoods for community organizations and things of that nature to look at. So this is kind of an equity frame in terms of how you can look at each of the districts and how they stack up and what are the resources within your district specifically around some of these extracurricular type, not extracurricular, but like these other elements of like kind of the school experience. And these are some of the things that we're slicing through the data to look at and provide feedback for the board around these items. There you go, and I'll turn it back over to you on educational adequacy.
As Pranitha had mentioned earlier, one of the criteria that we are looking at schools from the perspective of educational adequacy. And what it really does is tying how the space, the physical space really supports the program that is hosted in the school and how it really lends to it. So what our team assessed all of the schools within the district, and they looked at all of the spaces both inside and outside the building, so like campus holistically, to see how it really supports from a learning perspective as well as an instruction perspective. So while we didn't go to every single classroom, we went to representative classrooms, but in addition to that, we assessed assembly spaces, the office spaces, outdoor areas, the entrance experience. So all of those different things all contribute to into this lens of educational adequacy. And overall, the educational adequacy is made up of over 260 different criteria. This is just a snapshot of 5 of them. And some of the findings that we have from our assessment so far is in terms of all of the classrooms that we assessed, only 23% were in good condition. So in terms of like tying back into some of those emerging priorities, like everyone's really elevated the need for access to modernized classrooms. Currently in the district, only 23% of them really meet that goal. So overall, 82% of the classrooms have sufficient access to daylight. So like bright, warm classes, welcoming classes, which you have the ability to, if it's too bright, to like use shades and cut it out. But 82% of the classrooms have them. In terms of like other criteria, some of the things that we're looking at is, for example, 69% of all of the campuses in the district have a main office at an intuitive arrival location. Why is that important? Well, from one perspective, in terms of like managing who is entering your campus from a safety and like just like a flow perspective, that is an important criteria. And an additional criteria is you want campuses to be welcoming to visitors, to your students, to parents who are already part of the school, but also like could potentially be part of the school in the future. So that is another criteria. So only 69% of campuses have them. So this is just really trying to illustrate there's a lot of imbalance in terms of like the quality, like access of facilities in terms of like how they really support like this holistic service that a school is supposed to be. So just want to highlight that there's a lot of need in terms of our various schools, and we'll be able to identify which schools and how they really rank against each other. a lot of the information that we've shared is being like at a school by school basis. This is just like kind of zooming out a little bit. The map to the right shows all of the sites where there's transitional kindergarten available as a program, and then the orange circle, or let's call it orange color, but those are sites where there's a wait list. So essentially, more students applied to enroll in them, and they didn't have sufficient capacity to enroll these students. So what this is really showing is there's a lot of demand for those programs. The map to the left is basically showing, according to the U.S. Census, where children between the ages of 1 to 4 years live. And what this is essentially showing is there is a sizable number of students, potential students in the future. So not only there is a current demand that the district isn't meeting, but it will continue to be the case for the next few years. And this could potentially be a priority in terms of expanding early childhood education, because that can not only boost current enrollment, but also like families of already within the system can continue to be as part of the district. So just another lens in terms of what the priorities could be.
Can I say just one? I think the image on the left in blue, each of those, they have different shapes, but those are the census blocks. This is your future district. Those are children right now that are age 0 to 4. So just where you see the density, the darker colors, there's a high percentage of students that are between the ages of 0 and 4 in those areas. So like just really want to kind of articulate like what that map is. And there is, and you are seeing it show up in the surveys as well, where that is where we are seeing some of those spaces that do have wait lists and families are not getting access to TK. In some of the areas where you do see that there aren't wait lists, usually that's the result of us having capacity in the buildings to actually add classes, because there's enough classes in those space to continue to add program there. But some of those other places, we don't have the ability to add program.
I'm just going to ask real quick because I'm getting really confused about what these maps are. Yeah. So the map in blue is where students currently are.
0 to 4. So these are pre-entering into our district or right at the verge of entering into TK.
Yeah. And then the other map is what now?
Wait lists. So where you see a green dot is where we have a program. And then the orangish circle, is like there's an OUSD program with a wait list. And that means that, and Mr. Betlock has talked about this previously in some of the enrollment presentations he's done, is that some of those families do not choose to enter into TK because they're not getting into the school that they're choosing, and that's why they're on that wait list. And usually there's no capacity to expand the TK offerings at those school sites.
I feel like it would be also helpful to know like where those families live, because this to me is at least just showing me our choice policy isn't working. Folks are choosing outside of the district, and if they don't get that choice outside of where they live, and then if they don't get that choice, they're just not enrolling in OUSD. And I feel like we need to shift that around some, but it would be helpful to know where those families that are waitlisted actually live.
I think that's definitely something that we can get the data for when we come back in the fall. It is an important criteria for us to be considering. Thank you.
So just to go over next steps during the summer, but also just coming back in August, as Mr. Thomas mentioned, we definitely want to continue our engagement. We just launched these engagement sessions, but there's going to be active engagement ongoing throughout the development of the master plan. So in terms of the summer, we are reaching out to our summer school programs, engaging with students, conducting or coordinating to conduct some in-class activities with elementary, middle, high school students. And then continuing to engage and reach out to our staff, whether that's tabling at any existing events, professional development days, trying to continue to get that feedback. When we're back in August, we do want to actively start engaging also with our Parent and Student Advisory Committee, PSAC, and the All-City Council, along with our community advisory committees. And then just continuing to leave our online resources for feedback active, open, and continue to hear from our steering committee, which is a committee that's also helping us inform the process and giving us advice in terms of prioritization, just like you all are in terms of how do we want to continue to engage with everybody. And then back in August, we'll come back to this committee with our preliminary findings in terms of where we are with some of our refined analysis. But I think that wraps up our presentation, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Board colleagues, any questions? Go ahead, Director Barry.
So, thank you, per usual. My first question is about how you balance sort of the insight you're getting through this process. Some of the insights that should be coming out of like the 3 R's process and any of like the community engagement around budget, and just wondering, like, there's a clear overlap, and there is going to be our ability to respond to the feedback is obviously going to depend on our ability to identify the resources and the right resources. So just wondering what, the overlap of work is.
That's a great question. And I think as you're seeing more districts that are leaning in around the facilities master plan, these are the questions that they're asking within the master planning process, because the enrollment plus the facility, and not just where your facilities are, but also the condition of those facilities and what programs fit in those facilities. So like one of the things that struck me around that data was there are I assume there are elementary schools, I haven't actually gone into the data, that don't have a multi-purpose room or a meeting place, right? That shifts the way the culture of a school can be developed, because you don't have a meeting space where you can bring all the children together to talk to them. And I know when we started Life Academy, we started in 2111 International, and it did not have a meeting space that held the school, so we met in the parking lot. That was our auditorium, right? So like some of those questions are really critical questions when you're thinking about the footprint of the future footprint of the district. Where do you want to invest those dollars? And so there is a slide right here, and it's right here. This is one of the things that this is where the timing got a little bit off for us, right? We had hoped that the re-envisioning, redesigning, and restructuring process would happen parallel to what we were doing, and we're waiting for those engagements to happen so that we could dovetail off the findings that were happening there. And those engagements never really happened in a robust way. And so we then went and started doing the facilities master plan, because it is time bound. Like, the state of California and Proposition 2, there's a cadence that you want to be submitting that in this next year. And so, but I do see the information that comes out of your facilities master plan becoming a key data point and a key variable for the board and the community to use around how you're structuring the future footprint for the district. And so, I know there's been a lot of conversation with the board about this. We would see this as a foundational document that transcends for the next decade, so that the board is using this as a tool anytime you're engaging in these conversations around the number of schools that we're operating and like the condition of those buildings. So, we know that it's a complex process for any school district to go through. And one of the reasons why we selected Perkins Eastman was because they have experience in lots of school districts, urban school districts that have declining enrollment or shifts in their enrollment, and they are helping support those districts in the way that they're thinking. And we can actually connect you all with like some of their master plans, so that you're learning from some of the best practices around that.
I think the other reason why I asked, and I'm looking at my colleagues here, is because I think what I hear from what the community engagement that you did do is these are insights that inform priorities, and priorities should also drive how we make decisions about the trade-offs related to the budget. So when we do future community engagement around budget, I feel like you're going to continue to do work, and so like let's figure out how to align the community engagement, which I think is ultimately better for families because they don't have the demand of multiple touch points. And then I'm also thinking about the superintendent search and how much of this should find its way into our engagement with community around that, and just like who we're looking for as well. And then I may have a second round if we have time.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much. Pretty thorough. Thank you very kindly. I really appreciate that. But I'm just wondering, at the very onset, you talked about high-quality learning spaces, and I'm wondering if you can be more specific and talk about if you actually see that in the district. Is it something that you're proposing to actually create, or are you suggesting that it's something deficit that we don't have?
So the district a couple of months ago finally came out with a educational specification, and that kind of like really defines, and through a process really defines what the expectation is for the district themselves, like in terms of like the high quality learning spaces that the district wants to have. So in terms of our assessments, there were like some baselines about certain things, but we've also incorporated elements from those from the education specifications in terms of like, this is the ideal space that we want all of the students to experience, from the perspective of a classroom, from the perspective of being in like an auditorium or like a gathering space, like kind of what Preston mentioned, or just like generally in a campus. So that was like the baseline in terms of how we evaluate, like does a classroom or a school have this or not have it. So that was the basis for checking if schools had these spaces or didn't have these spaces. And they're like, it was looking at, okay, like does this classroom have sufficient electrical outlets, or are they using a single extension cord to like power the projector, laptops, like a fan, or like a variety of things? Is it looking at like, do they have like a presentation wall plus another wall where like a teacher can like enough space to like write and like present on, or is it like extremely cluttered? Do they have sufficient like storage space to just the things that are needed in a classroom? So it's like comprehensively like a lot of those elements going into like defining what that is. And so in terms of like the classrooms that we were said, only like, you know, a small number of percentage of classrooms met those criteria. And so holistically, like a lot of the other spaces really need more investment from that perspective.
Do you mind if I add one, and I'll bring it right home to you in District 7? One of our newest schools in District 7 is the Woodland campus. It holds Acorn Woodland and it holds Encompass. And when you go and you walk through, and this is how fast kind of like programmatic shifts have happened in education with supplemental supports for students. If you go to the Woodland campus, you'll notice that there is a lot of their pull-out spaces that they're working with kids are in the hallways, right? And they have dividers that they use to like kind of cordon them off, so there's some level of privacy. But that's one of our newer facilities that was created, and probably on the educational adequacy, it's showing positively in some of the spaces, but the supplemental places are not sufficient for the students in that school. And the school is being very innovative and creative about how they're supporting students in that space. And so my shout out is to them at both the Encompass and Woodland campus, but it also is a place where the design and the way of modern classrooms and the way that we're serving our students and staffing them are different than the way that the buildings were constructed. And that's one of our newer facilities. If you go into some of our older campuses where they're just designed with a single classroom and that's it, there aren't supplemental spaces. So you see it from staff feedback, you hear it from student feedback, that some of the spaces aren't really oriented around the way instruction has evolved in the last 70 years. And so Acorn Woodland is a great example of a campus that you can go to and you can see where there are like high levels of educational adequacy, and there's also these spaces that need to be addressed and we need solutions for them.
Just wanted to, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just wanted to give a strategy that I think you can probably employ, and that is to actually go to churches, especially in District 7. I'm thinking about several churches in District 7 and then also in District 6. I'm thinking about individuals who send their kids to Oakland schools, but perhaps they were not able to respond to the survey. But if you go to the church, you'll probably catch them at the church, and then you can actually ask them at that time to respond to the survey. So I know it's a little more work on your part, but it's getting the information that you need, and it's very current data.
So Director Barry said ditto. But yes, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the thoroughness, and I appreciate our PTSA at Skyline for working through a little bit of this with us since they missed part of the engagement. And I also just really like the activity that we had folks do. I think that that's hopefully some of the activities that we're having our students do in summer programs, because I literally to the ask around like how can we engage students? I was like, we have summer programs, why not? And I think ACC in the coming year will also be really helpful in that. And I also wrote down PSAC. I guess one thing that was a little bit concerning to me, I think it's the next slide where it talks about educational adequacy for the different ones. As we're talking about academics and reading and all of the different pieces, seeing how classrooms and libraries were the most like deficient in that list, to me, like called my attention, right? If we are to make deep investments and change some of the numbers that we're seeing around specifically literacy, that's what I think of when I think of libraries. Those are places I think where we need to like look at more, drill down more. And it also needs to be we need to have a way to communicate that to our families. Because I think there was even a debate, at the PTSA at Skyline about like outdoor spaces, indoor spaces, which are the ones that we need to kind of provide more support for. And I agree with our staff around like the coaching staff of like, we do need to invest in those spaces, because that does attract students, specifically at the high school level, of like, what does an athletic program look like? How can I be involved in that? And when we don't make those investments, students then go elsewhere where they do see those investments. But if both their gym and their classroom isn't conducive to learning and isn't conducive to them being in school, then we're not going to see them in school, right? So just trying to balance those two. I will also say another thing that was brought up as a part of that conversation and other conversations is safety. I know that is in here somewhere and in like the Measure Y bond and all those. And yeah, and I think I want us to think about like different ways of what safety looks like, because it doesn't always look like security cameras and gates and things like that. So how else are we providing a safe campus to our students? So that, and I think like the door entry that you just talked about of like making sure that there is a main office that is very visibly the main office of that campus, so that we can greet folks and make sure that we have a flow of students and folks in there from a community. But just thinking about, again, instead of maybe, and this is just spitballing here, but instead of like a fence, maybe like, is there like shrubs that we can put that make a like makeshift barrier so folks don't feel, or cover up the fence with that so that folks have more greenery around them and they don't feel that it's a different kind of space. But yeah, those are just my thoughts on that. I don't know if you all have any thoughts about what I just mentioned, but we can go to public comment after that.
Yeah, I actually, that was one of the moments when we were talking about some of the safety investments that we've made, and this has happened now twice in 2 community engagements where it started to get deprioritized. And I know 2 years ago, 3 years ago, like it was number one post-pandemic safety of my children. And I'm not saying that safety is not high up on any parent's list, but what I am saying is that when we're talking about our facilities and the investments that we have been making in Measure Y to provide more clear guidance around, the door entry cameras and things like that, so you know who's coming on site, that at least from the staff, we are hearing that those investments are deprioritizing it. And that's what your master plan is really about, is like where you're gonna get limited dollars, where do you invest them to bring the biggest value to families? And so I will say that some of those safety investments that we have been doing, and I do think that there are lots of other things that we should be considering around it, but at least the ones that we have made are having some level of impact on what we're seeing in the data right now.
With that, we'll go to public comment. Mr. Hollis, is there any public comment on this item?
Yes, Asada Olagbala. How much time would you like to allot for public comment?
Let's do 2 minutes.
I'm always looking at the money. So how much we paying Perkins Eastman, and what is their role? And what is the cost involved for their services? It's confusing because there's supposed to be a facilities master plan, but some of the data reflects schools, and you have 82 schools and 150 facilities. I can't separate when you're talking about what. Some of your documents say facilities, some of them say classrooms, some say schools. So then most of your documentation, when it comes to numbers, it's percentage. Like you said, 36% of OUSD schools are poor or deficient, so that means you have 82 schools. You're talking about 30 schools. I like to see the numbers. I don't know what the council is satisfied with just saying that percentage, but the numbers make sense. Now you have a survey. Eventually you have to make a determination of the validity of your survey. When you have 34,000 students enrolled, what is the number of surveys that you have to have it on hand to say the survey is valid? Have you already come up with that? Then you have Castlemont feedback was going to take place on 6/16. School is out. So how are we going to do that? Then you have, this is what I looked at that's concerning. This is our enrollment over the last 20 years, declining. So if the decline has, for 20 years, been a decline, what do we have to say that it's going to go up after 20 years? And when we built McClymonds, it's projected after we finish McClymonds in 2027, we're going to be able to have an enrollment of 600 students. Where are they coming from? I just don't understand. Oh, my time. You can tell me when my time's up.
Yeah, so I did have similar questions because for the survey, I was wondering how folks noted which district they're in, because I did see there was like a 3-point-something percentage of folks that didn't know the district. And also, is that, because again, we have a choice district system, so is that the district that they currently reside in, or is it the district in which their child goes to school in? Because that could be vastly different.
That's actually a good feedback. I think we can make that explicit. Right now, I think we've just mentioned district, which they are representing, but it doesn't necessarily mean residing or attending, so we can clarify that. And then if I can also address the question about Castlemont, I think that's a typo from our side. We did conduct a high school town hall already, and our next staff feedback session was meant to be at the facilities committee, but we said because of having lower turnout, we would come back in August so we can get some more outreach done and then have more staff representation as well, and then continue elementary, middle, high school through the summer program.
Can I just to add, that was actually the Castlemont, I believe it was May 21st. Yeah. And that was actually landed on the special meeting for the board. And so there were a lot of folks that did want to attend but couldn't because they were attending or watching the board deliberations that were happening. So like it just was a very difficult time. And this also goes back to the timing, like when we're doing it. And absolutely love the suggestions that are out there about more ways of engaging with staff and students and families. And so I will say just one other piece around the work that we're doing. in the past, and I just want to, like, I think this is a big distinction about this facilities master plan, and what we heard in public comment is that it was a static document. It was a paper, it's like 300 and something pages, that's a PDF that's online. All of the data that we're having will be disaggregated by school. It will be in dashboards online, so you can access all of the information. So you're just seeing a snapshot of when we talk about educational adequacy and we're showing you 5 different points. You're going to be able to disaggregate that across all of those points in the dashboards, and you're going to be able to see how each school shows up, how your district shows up. So there is going to be a robust data system to make it public and allow people to do their own analysis around the capacity of buildings and things like that. So I did want to say you're seeing snapshots of what we're building, and it is at the school level, the classroom level, you know, the building level, like the campus level. So there are lots of slices for this, but it will be very living and online as a dashboard that we'll be able to update on a yearly basis.
Also, just to add to that, I think there was one slide that had the different colors of the different districts. It would be helpful to note, to Ms. Asada's point, how many schools are in those districts, how many facilities are in those districts, and how many charter schools that are on OUSD property are in each of those districts. And then I had one other thing to add. Oh, and I really appreciate the plug for our churches, because I do think that that is really important, especially in District 6 and 7 and District 3. I would also say publicizing it in our local newspapers as well, because it is a QR code. So if we have it on the local newspaper, people can just take a snapshot. And specifically El Tímpano, which is a Mayan mum, Spanish speaking publication. And so it gets to a community that often doesn't have access to advocacy. And they are pretty rad when it comes to these things. So,
Can I recommend some of our churches like mine?
yes,
It's nothing but a bunch of
that's
seniors.
District 6. Yes.
Seniors, and you don't need to come to our church.
Mrs. Sada's talking about her church now. Yeah.
Older community.
Yeah. But they have grandkids. They know some of these things, and or can share with their neighbors and other communities.
Large percent of them don't live in Oakland anymore.
Thank you. So that's not our only strategy, so that's why. Okay, great. So this is not a voting item, but thank you for the presentation. Now we're moving to
I sent you all 10 questions. by the way.
C2 25-0704, which is the Facilities Committee Asset Management and Real Property Services Facility Planning and Management. I think we have a presentation, some folks as well.
Okay, so this is our effort to keep coming back and talking about our asset management strategies and continuing to give you all updates on where we are with the process. This specifically relates to our asset management and real property services that we have our partners on in identifying what some of our strategies would look like for 2 phases of asset management. And I'll go straight to the agenda. I know you all have seen some of these slides before. But we wanted to give you all updates on where we are with the process and just talk through a little bit about the timelines and what to expect in terms of next steps. Go briefly over what feasibility studies look like within phase 1 properties. Get your feedback on a staff survey that we're hoping to distribute starting in August and start getting staff feedback on overall asset management strategies, and then get feedback on phase 2 properties. So just at a very high level, we've presented this information before. We had identified our vacant and underutilized properties and some leased properties as well. In terms of looking at the overall strategy, we divided these into 2 phases based on board feedback in terms of prioritization. Phase 1 included 1025 Second Avenue, Lakeview, and then the former Ralph J. Bunch Academy. And then the other, I believe, 6 or 7 properties were within Phase 2, and then we were hoping to get some feedback around prioritization for those as well. For today's presentation, we're specifically talking about where we are with our Phase 1 properties. With that, I will pass it on to our partner, Chris, to talk a little bit about the next slides.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back. Good to see you. I enjoyed the facilities master plan conversation. That was good to hear. Just checking in on where we are on the Phase 1 property analysis. We've checked in with the board at various points and in various formats over the past months. In December, we met with the board to just sort of align on the project objectives. We met with the board in March in a series of 2x2 meetings to give an interim update. And in May, we had an open public study session to share our Phase 1 findings and have a discussion. Sometime soon, we'll meet with the board to share Phase 1 property evaluations. And I know we're here in June, so we're up against summer recess coming up. But based on your direction, we're prepared to move forward with feasibility studies for Phase 1 properties, for workforce housing and or affordable housing, and additional assessment of Phase 2 properties. We see that as another conceptual analysis, similar to what we did with the Phase 1 properties. In the study session in May, there were some next steps presented and discussed. So number one is talking about feasibility studies. My next slide, I have some information I'll share about the scope of feasibility studies, but it's my understanding you'll work with your staff to make recommendations on that. 2 is an all-staff survey for employee housing. I also have a slide to talk about that, but I think that's a good next step to gauge the level of interest and demand for workforce housing. And then finally, study Phase 2 sites at a similar level to Phase 1. So, we could do the entire Phase 2 properties or a subset based on prioritization. So in the Phase 1 analysis, that was really a conceptual analysis so you could understand the trade-offs and what it would mean to pursue affordable housing or housing for unhoused or workforce housing for your employees, or understand the as-is value to sell these properties. And what a feasibility study would be to choose a topic, be it workforce housing, affordable housing, or both, and do a much more in-depth analysis. This is really an industry standard thing to do for school districts looking to pursue this type of work. I really think of it as accomplishing 2 main things. One is trying to remove future surprises for the school district, and we accomplish that with the technical due diligence, so doing studies to make sure that something won't pop up, or minimize the possibility that something could pop up along the way that could seriously impact the project, the costs, the timeline, the feasibility, et cetera. And then the other major thing is about funding. So funding is just absolutely critical for both affordable housing projects and workforce housing projects. And so the 2 sub-bullets there, programming and design and financial analysis, both go into coming up with the funding strategy. So I think one major question that you all sort of need to determine as a board is whether you're willing to put in general obligation bond money to any type of housing project, whether it's workforce housing, affordable housing, or otherwise, and if so, when and how much, right? I think that's a really important milestone to reach. Let me just take a second and talk about general obligation bonds. So I sometimes call them GO bonds or general obligation bonds. They're also known as facilities bonds. This is voter-approved bonds that are typically used by school districts for construction. And that could be, building schools or renovating schools, or it could be workforce housing projects or other types of projects. This is how a lot of school districts around the state are helping subsidize their workforce housing projects. And it's totally separate from the district's general fund. The general fund is what's used for salaries and educational programs, et cetera. And so this is a completely different bucket of money. And in fact, the facilities bonds, the GO bonds cannot be used for salaries or educational programs. Just wanted to make that note. So that's, some topics about feasibility studies. I'm happy to come back to this and answer more questions or go into more detail at the end, but I'll move on to the staff survey. So, we're talking a lot about buildings and facilities and housing, but really this is all to serve your employees who are the front line in interacting with the kids. So I think a staff survey gauging level of interest and support for a workforce housing project, for example, is a really great next step. It's something that, virtually all school districts do that are considering going down this road. It can help you, of course, gauge just the number of people who are interested in living in workforce housing, but also learning more about their current housing situation. Is it sustainable? Is it affordable for them? Is it meeting their needs? Do they have a long commute time? Have they considered leaving their job at the school district or the profession altogether due to the lack of affordable housing? That's something that we commonly see. It can also help refine what type of housing project might be most needed. So understanding household size, which translates into number of bedrooms and unit sizes, and also parking demand is really important in planning these types of projects. And then finally, there's a question up here. The font is small, but in my mind, it's a really important question. It's, even if you don't yourself plan to live in workforce housing, do you recognize that this is a need for the school district, and do you support the school district going down this path? And what we often find is really overwhelming support there, and if that's the case with you all, I think that's a pretty strong basis that you're going down the right path in exploring this. And I think now we'll hand it back to Pranita and Preston.
Yeah, so just very briefly, in terms of the phase 2 properties, we have a list of the properties that were identified that could be pulled out for phase 2 prioritization. We could conduct the same level of analysis that we did for phase 1, which is looking at the demographics, looking at the neighborhoods, looking at assessing those properties, and then bringing back valuation. In terms of some of the potential properties, as you're thinking through prioritization, we did kind of sectionalize a few that may be based on your size, location, and interest that we have heard from previous conversations. You have Golden Gate CDC, the Old Chabot Observatory, and the Tilden campus, formerly the Urban Monastery. This was initial feedback as we were talking through what phase 1 looked like and just what could be phase 2. And then in terms of the remainder of the properties, Hillside at Castlemont, we are discussing about anticipated demolition of the portables that are on those property or on that property. Piedmont CDC, some section of Piedmont was also leased out to the city for, the portables were leased out to the city for temporary use for a library. And then we have the Edward Shands and Tilden CDC campus or properties, which are currently in a long-term ground lease with the developer. And then the Bond Street was the other additional property, but it's a smaller property, and I think there's an opportunity again to talk through like what would be some of the strategies best suited for that property. But that is the last slide, and we're happy to take any comments. One additional note, in terms of phase 1 evaluation, we are hoping to bring those to the board on the June 25th meeting in a closed session. We are coordinating to bring back the valuation of the 3 properties within phase 1 at a closed session with the board on June 25th. Sorry.
Board colleagues?
Yeah, one thing that came up for me, so there's like the micro comment that I want to make is similar to something that came up in the last presentation, which is that I think there's a real opportunity to align like all the community engagement and even like the study with other stuff that's happening in the city at this time, all the community engagement, all the city planning. So as much as possible, would love to hear presentations that include a perspective about what else is happening in these conversations. And related to that, I just left a convening. I went to a convening last Friday, 9 counties in the Bay Area, a bunch of housing folks, probably some of your colleagues were there, talking about future local state measures 2026, 2028. And it feels relevant to have a pulse on potential revenue sources for all the work that we may want to do around housing, not just with OUSD property, but just in the city overall, so that we can make sure we maximize or optimize our resources. And we're not spending money, you know, that we don't have to spend because there might be other sources.
Yes, thank you, and I agree with that. I think we need to make sure that we're maximizing every dollar we have. I'd like to first be on the hot seat, Preston Thomas. And I've gotten a lot of constituents asking me about Edward Shands and why that isn't on the list for evaluation. Can you talk a little bit as to like what's going on that property and why they are they are on this list of not suitable for potential development?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and there have been lots of issues that have been lifted up at that site as well. The main reason is Edward Shands and the Tilden CDC are currently in a ground lease, and the board would have to take action around how to move forward on that ground lease. And so we will be continuing to talk about that, and we're in conversations with the developer right now. So the reason why we're not saying to move forward with it at this moment is because there is a current plan for it that the board has approved and is moving forward. But we are aware of the challenges that site is having currently, and so we are actively engaged with them about it.
Great, thank you, because that is a concern, especially with the recent fire at the site. I will also say with the staff survey, I think what would be helpful is not only for the current staff that are returning for this year, but staff who have left as of last year, and then I would also dare say staff who have applied in the past. Because one thing that I have found in the conversations with our talent team is we have really talented folks that come to that apply, they go through the process, and then they get stuck because they can't find somewhere. And so I think we need to capture that information, and I think that would help in having our community understand why we would need this, and also supporting our labor partners in understanding that as well. As we think about workforce housing. Next, I have a question about the feasibility study. I guess I want to understand a little bit more about how it reduces risk for uncertainty and how it informs an evaluation and selection criteria, because I don't know about you all, but I feel like from the conversations we've had as a board, I think I will just say that I'm hearing that we are interested in affordable housing for our community. And why wouldn't we just then try to move forward with an RFP with just like an affordable housing lens that then whoever is applying to the RFP could provide us with some of the financial and technical information?
Specifically affordable housing?
Yes.
As opposed to workforce?
Yes, let's do that one first, and then we can talk about the other one.
Well, I'll talk about just the due diligence. If we could flip to the feasibility study slide. Thanks. So I talked about the two main purposes here have to do with minimizing surprises for the district as you go along the process. And that's the technical due diligence part. So some of those studies listed there would help sort of reduce the possibility that there's something unexpected in one of those reports that could seriously alter, feasibility of doing a housing project, make it much smaller, make it much more expensive, make it not financeable, et cetera. So that's, pretty typical for someone to do these types of studies to find out the answers early on before you sort of go down the path. And do we have Chenu on the Zoom? She might be able to address the specifics around affordable housing.
Yep, I'm here. Sure. Hello, committee members. So with affordable housing, and we call affordable housing Big A. So typically those are properties that can house units at 80% and below, right? So you can get the property tax exemption. There are only sort of a couple of ways. I mean, there's finite resources to finance affordable housing because of debt and equity in a typical sort of project development cannot actually finance affordable housing. So we typically have a gap in affordable housing developments. And so to the extent that the district wants to create a situation for success for whichever developer potentially could develop the affordable housing, we want to enter into some type of agreement where we know on our side what we think the most kind of financially feasible path would be in order to enter into an agreement with the developer. So it's sort of like ensuring that we de-risk it so that we on the school side understand sort of what we want to see and whether we think there's a path forward in terms of financing.
And is that also the case? You talked about 80% or above. What about 50% or 80% or below?
It's
what about 50%?
Below, yeah. Below? Yeah. So there are a couple of, I mean, the source that typically, and I'm sure you guys have heard of the source, it's low-income housing tax credits and tax-exempt bonds. And typically the projects that are competitive, because it's a competitive process, you have to apply to the state, are those projects that are at 50% AMI and below. And that's where the most need is also. But you can get property tax exemption up to 80% AMI. And sometimes if you want to have what we call an income averaging project, so you can sort of have units for, community members who are at sort of 80% and below, like a teacher, but also be able to house, a family that is at 50% and below. Right. So, but typically an affordable housing project are those projects that house people at 50% and below. And in terms of competitiveness for bonds and credits, if you have what's called like homeless units, right? So units that are available to those at 30% and below, and or for those who are at risk of homelessness, that allows you to be a little bit more competitive for the bonds and credits. So it's like real sausage making in some respects to try to get the balancing right in order to be competitive for these public resources.
Thank you.
Do you mind if I just add a little piece to it? I think it actually, if I take your two previous questions and combine them together, I think that there's the story to be told a little bit around the Shands property as well. Like, one of the things in some of the study sessions, we showed how long the affordable housing and even the workforce, like these are long-term ventures that the district is going into, right? And you don't want to have moments where you get blindsided by something that you could have done your due diligence about, and particularly around the affordable housing, as Chen, you just talked about, there are these things that can come up that could make the feasibility of that project moving forward. And one that we are actively working towards in our spending plan, we're building a contingency for if there are soils issues that emerge across the district, right? We know in Cole, we know at McClymonds, we know at other sites that there's a history in Oakland of environmental injustice where there are these toxic soils that need to get addressed. For the district to do their due diligence on the front side of that, right? So anybody wanting to develop that property understands what needs to get taken care of, whether it's, like, I think this is a really good list, the environmental phase 1 study, like what's the history of the site? The geotechnical, is it in a liquefaction zone? because the footings that you're just gonna have to use for that building itself are gonna have to be significantly more expensive around that building. You would want that in your RFP as it goes out, so the developers that are interested in developing the affordable housing have that in mind when they're figuring out the type of property that they're including in the RFP. So I think one of the places that if you go too fast, you might get developers that are really interested in developing the workforce housing, but might not have the financial like backing or have done all the complex finances that we've talked about to get that stack built. But then they also may deal with some constructability issues that happen on the site because the district didn't bring that forward. And usually by the time that gets discovered, you're 3 years down the road. If the district hasn't provided you that information, there's a new board sitting there and they're like, well, why did that board decide to vote to do this with this particular project? So like, I think the long-term nature of both the master plan, but also what you're doing with your asset managements is a really important thing for the district to have foresight as to what, the potential usage are, right? But then also what might be some of the obstacles. And you can mitigate against some of those if the district does its due diligence on the front side before going out for RFP. And I would just add one other piece. When I've talked and I've spoken with other districts that are now more going out to RFP, a lot of them have had a history of doing this work, and they've also done their due diligence on their sites in terms of feasibility so that they have good clarity around what the site has and what the opportunities are when they put out for RFP. And we just don't have that insight at this point for many of the properties that we're talking about.
Dr. Thompson?
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on what you mentioned earlier. You talked about staff survey, and this, again, just getting information. I think we should make sure we include the talent team in this, because the talent team actually executes an exit survey, and that the exit survey could actually be really good in terms of getting data as to why a person is relocating or moving around. So I think that's really important. And then, of course, we could probably find in there if it's a matter of workforce housing that's needed or not.
Mr. Hollis, any public comment on this agenda item?
Yes, Chair. Asada Olapala.
So when you're talking about affordable housing, that's a big discussion at City Hall. So people are asking, stop using the word affordable housing and talk about how much money, average minimum income, AMI. So from the county of Alameda, for affordable housing in Alameda County, for one person, you have to have a salary of $103,550. For a family of two, $118,000. And for a low income, average minimum income for affordable housing is $87,550. It's hard to live in, and then we're talking about insurance, we're talking about utilities, we're talking about the bonds, the measures. We had a man came in, city council, he's paying $12,000 in property taxes. You got to take up all those taxes if you're buying. So the cost for a feasibility study, when there was this relationship between you and Piedmont, the city started off with $700,000 for the feasibility study, and it went up to $1 million. So feasibility studies take, on average, 1.5 years or better. The mentioning of in-depth analysis and assessment and evaluation in the feasibility studies all have a cost factor. And so what is that going to be? And what happened to the 7-Eleven committee? As far as the Lakeview property is concerned, I thought that we had determined years ago that there were health risks involved with that property. That's why you originally moved the students away. So are we saying those health risks to consider developing the property is a non-factor? Is my question.
Thank you. And that does bring up a question for me as to the cost and time of a feasibility study. And would we be able to use bond dollars for that, or would that be general fund?
Can I say something?
Do you want to?
Super quick.
The Piedmont property was identified as a very valuable piece of property for teacher housing, where it's located. And I don't see it on here when you're talking about housing.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chris, why don't you?
I mean, I'm almost certain that bond monies legally can be used, but you'll want to check with your bond counsel, of course.
And I would say that there's a range of, I think, the way that slide, and it's not up immediately, but I do think it's a great reference for you all to hold, that each of those particular categories, there we go. You can go down and do the technical due diligence, and there absolutely is a cost for everything that you're doing on that list, right? And then you could do the programming and design, which is like, how can the property be used? And then the financial analysis. Each one of those has a cost, and we'll get back to the board around the cost as we're talking through the feasibilities with you around the types of studies that you're interested in conducting. And then you can actually go into the conceptual design that goes into more of the schematics, where you're actually starting to work with an architect about what the building can look like. That's when the timeline and the costs start to escalate significantly, and those are in the early phases of design for what you might be building there. And that's not what we're proposing. What we're just really proposing is like, what's the condition, what's the status of it, doing some of our due diligence. Like, for example, if you look at the traffic impact, getting a traffic study in CEQA is a really important part when you're going to adjust the traffic flow in those areas. That can be incredibly time consuming. And it's something that if you're deciding to move in affordable housing, that's going to be a key factor around the approval of the number of units that are going to be there and the parking around it.
Just Lakeview is a really great housing site because of its size and its location, but it's also somewhat complicated because of the grade and slope. So that's kind of the reason for the geotech and slope and grade to be listed up there. Structural should be spoken with about sort of retaining walls that might need to be done on that site. There's an existing building that might be reused, so talking to structural engineer about the structural integrity of reusing that existing building. Traffic, as Preston was just mentioning, since we're adjacent to the freeway and the freeway on-off ramp and a major intersection right there with a lot of public transportation. So having an expert just weigh in on, is Caltrans looking to change that on-off ramp, for example, and the pedestrian bridge, things like that. So that site in particular is particularly complicated, and that's, a lot of this technical due diligence up there are those considerations.
Thank you. And my next question was going to be about the environmental factors that Mrs. Sada brought up, because it is right next to a highway. So there is that like smoke and possibly other factors. Would that go into the environmental phase 1 site assessment, or is that a different, or is that CEQA?
Phase 1 site assessment is about is there possibility of any contamination in the soil from a former dry cleaner or agricultural things like that. And so a phase 1 is a desktop analysis where they just look at the history of the site and old aerial photos, and then a phase 2 is if it seemed like there might be something in the soil. Phase 2 would where they actually come and take soil samples and send them to a lab and test them, so start investigating. But we're not suggesting that would be needed. You start with the phase 1. But specifically about building housing immediately adjacent to the freeway, the one concern, of course, is noise impact, and you can build the glass of the building to a higher noise reduction standard, for example, for the handful of floors that are sort of most impacted by that. In terms of contamination, Ellen, I think there's so many safety standards for new construction of housing these days. I think that you're covered from that.
Okay. Any other questions? microphone.
I'm hesitant to ask this live or just include it in my email that you're going to get with my other 7 questions. But it's bothering me. So I'm sure there's like a set of questions that overlap that we would want to ask if we were studying the feasibility of different uses for each of these properties. Will the feasibility study address that, or is it just about affordable? Do we have to choose the specific scope going in?
Yeah, and that's the slide about working with, as there are like a proposed, wait, is it in here as the next steps? Yes, it's number 1. So there may be reuses for that property that aren't just affordable housing, aren't workforce housing, and other concepts that board directors have. We will work with you over the summer with these concepts, because the 2 vehicles for you to introduce a feasibility study is one here. So working with your board colleagues to bring something to the facilities committee as a recommended feasibility study, because there is going to be a cost associated with it, right? So it will need the full board to vote, or you can bring it as a new legislative item. So if there is a concept that you have, we will work with you and we'll work with our partners around what is the level of feasibility study given the type of project that you're interested in moving forward across those 3 properties. Did that?
Yes, but just to clarify, because what you're suggesting, I'm interpreting from your response, is that different concepts require different feasibility studies. You cannot conduct a feasibility study to assess.
I mean, I would say there's the due diligence items, those technical studies. That list up top is universal. That would be if you're building a school or any type of housing, those are the same studies, more or less, that would be done. Where it starts to diverge a little bit is around programming and design, and certainly financial analysis, because there are different funding sources.
Okay.
Thank you. We did take public comment, and this is not a voting item, so let's keep it moving. Mrs. Sada, say it in the microphone if you're gonna say it. One last public comment.
This is being in the city business. A feasibility study, you have a set concept that you have in mind. The feasibility study determines if that concept is practical, financially, all the potential obstacles, blah, 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 everything. But you start off with, you know what you want. The study tells you the capacity of achieving what you want.
Appreciate you having community presentation, be a part of the presentation. All right, thank you, Mrs. Sada, for that. Now we're on to new legislative business, which is D1 25-1628, Facilities Committee 2025 Summer Facilities Projects, yay, Facilities Planning Management. I believe Ms. Rambisi or
I think Mr. David Colbert is online and will be making this
everybody.
presentation. Getting a new voice
Sorry
in there.
about that, David.
Yeah, thank you,
No
David.
worries. Can everybody hear me?
Speak up a little bit.
Speak up a little bit. Hold on, let me turn it up. Make sure. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Perfect. So good evening, board members. Good to see you all. I'll just go over this kind of really quickly. What we have is what you guys are typically familiar with receiving as part of our back to school kind of summer updates to you all. You all usually get kind of a presentation showing all the work that we did for the summer. What we did this year is we brought to you all what we're going to do in advance. And we added not just what we're doing with facilities, but with B&G, the Buildings and Grounds team as well, to show you all just an overall view of all of the work that we'll be doing. We also included the different funding sources and the partnerships that we have to do the work. So I won't go through all of them. I mean, it's several different types from securities to painting to turfs to solar. So it's a multitude of various types of work. of which some may, and you guys are familiar with this as well, some may end up being summer plus, but we wanted to get this in your hands so that you can help track through what we'll be doing this summer. So I'll pause there to see if there's any questions, comments, or anything like that as you all look through the list of projects.
Hi, David. This is Director Batchelor. I did see Cox is on that list, and under funding sources is charter. And from my understanding, that's probably Prop 51. Is that correct?
Let me find Cox on here.
It's like the fourth to last on the first page.
I can confirm, yes, that's part, we have to have a, we have to have a relationship with them and monitoring and supervising it, and yes, that is part of the Prop 51.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the school sites that are receiving the KIT funding, how is that determined?
I'll take that one. It's a kitchen infrastructure and training grant that comes from the state. This is the final year of spending. And so depending upon each of the situations for the school sites, there's some heavy investment in changing the water systems in our kitchens. So that is one area where we're investing KIT funds. The other one is some of the cafeterias that are in areas that need revitalization. Edna Brewer is one of them, Skyline is the other one, and McClymonds is the third. And we're hoping, one of the big things is if you spend the kitchen infrastructure funding down, you can get access to more kitchen infrastructure, and we definitely have some needs there. So we're in the spend down of this, focused on these projects, and it's in collaboration with Nutrition Services around the needs that they have, but also the state and the assessment of the condition of those facilities. And for example, you know, as we've talked about the McClymonds project, and it's already been fully demoed, one of the areas that was not included in the initial McClymonds project was the kitchen. The cafeteria would be done, but the kitchen would not. And this is one of those places where we're layering in the KIT funds to support that project, to expand kind of the scope of what's happening at McClymonds.
Thank you. And I really also just want to highlight and appreciate the Skyline bathroom remodel that's on the last page. That is something that I've been hearing ever since I got elected from Skyline. So I appreciate that that's happening in one bathroom. One set of bathrooms, I apologize, in one building. I did hear, though, about the deteriorating condition of their gym, their locker room, and some of the other athletic facilities. And I'm also wondering, as we're thinking about, like, and or looking at different specific pools of funding, such as the KIT funding, is there anything specific that we could use for, like, athletic programs or gyms or places? Like, I just am thinking right now of Eat, Learn, Play, but that's, you know, philanthropic dollars. But is there any other kind of state monies for those type of facilities improvements?
David, do you want to take it, or do you want me to jump in?
Sure, we can both handle it. So the short answer is what I'll say, Director Baxter, is that we always look for partnerships and ways to use our funds as well as any grants like Preston mentioned. Currently, Preston, you want to speak to if we have any presently?
Yeah, sure. We're always in conversation with partners in Eat, Learn, Play as an entity that has been supporting us around schoolyards, literacy, all those different areas around the three pillars, the Eat, Learn, and the Play. So we're in constant conversation with them and Under Armour about future investments. We don't have anything to immediately, discuss because that is an ongoing conversation with them. I would say, part of what you're seeing here is actually why we wanted to bring this forward was you're seeing the blended funding that we're using to support the facilities at our schools, right? And one of the pieces is when the deferred maintenance fund is at $3 million, when you have that much need, we just wanted to show the full girth of the projects that we're doing across the district, because you always get a little, like the timing of the summer work has been compressed because of ELOP and like kind of getting like the expanded programs that we have during the summer. It's just a testament to all the complexity of how we're trying to really support our facilities. And so when we started talking about doing this, I was really excited by the fact that you're seeing the depth of investments that are happening in our schools, and it's still not enough, right? The gym situation, not only there, I can also add multiple gyms, Castlemont, Montera, that like we've sanded the floors down so much that there's nothing else you can do, so it becomes a floor replacement. And so the one thing that actually really connects it to the first item that we talked about, one of the requirements now with Proposition 2 is the deferred maintenance plan, or the comprehensive maintenance plan must be submitted as well by all districts. And so that assessment that we're going to be doing, you'll be getting a much more robust deferred maintenance program where you'll be able to track these things. And one of the things that I'm really excited about in the bond and the spending plan, we are addressing the three fields that need to be addressed the most, which are McClymonds, Oakland High, and Cesar Chavez. You will not have a major school facility that needs a turf replacement in Castlemont, in Fremont, until the next bond cycle. So we're trying to get the maintenance program to align where we're seeing future funding, and we're not there yet, but I can tell you that like we're aware, we've done it for fields, like, right? At the high school level. Let me just be clear, at the high school level. But like to your point, you know, we are trying to articulate it more so that the board can make good decisions around these, because we know there's still areas that we have to address.
And this is more of a comment from my board colleagues, but I think in our engagement at Skyline, there was also a conversation around the dollars that are brought in from Facilitron not being able to stay at the school site. And so as the Skyline facility is used by all kinds of, you know, organizations, that again is great that our community partners are using that space, but then it also then there's also like, you know, wear and tear that happens. Some equipment even got stolen at a certain point. And so I think it makes it, we should be thinking about how do we want to, if we want to shift that investment from Facilitron going directly into the general fund, if we want to make a shift towards actually going to the school sites, or even a percentage. Because I'm also thinking of Castlemont, and Castlemont's gym and areas is used a lot, and of all of our other school facilities. I think Fremont's always, there's always something happening at Fremont, which is great. But again, it's how are we ensuring that we're not just wearing and tearing our facilities and not reinvesting back into those school spaces for our students that are there on a regular basis. So just thinking about that as we head into like further budget conversations as the district.
Can I, sure. And I really like, we're closing out, we're at the end of the year, this last facilities committee. I just really want to appreciate the conversations that we've been having here, because just in the journey in the facilities committee this year, starting from like kind of our first meeting in August, we talked about this, how the state was making a legislative change which was reducing the Facilitron fees and wouldn't allow you to charge for deferred maintenance. You would just be able to pay for the cost of the staff that it would cost to open and close the buildings, which would put a greater burden on Oakland. That went enacted in January 1. And then there was our legislative kind of lobbyists and kind of like folks working both internally within facilities and with school services started to work with you all in your legislative platform. And then OUSD took a stance around, you know, kind of that legislation, which helped push it at the state, which it's currently still working through, but eventually, hopefully if approved by the state in this legislative like term, that we would end up being able to charge more for deferred maintenance, which directly cycles back into the schools, into the school system. I would say that there is a decision that the board needs to make around this. When we were in our last fiscal crisis, the revenue that's generated from Facilitron goes directly to the general fund. So it supports the general fund, right? It does not necessarily go into an account to save for the turf field that's being used at McClymonds, Skyline, Castlemont, Fremont, right? So like there are some decisions around how you prioritize, and we'll keep bringing you the information, but I just think it's a great cycle where you see conversations that we've been having in the facilities committee moving forward with policy recommendations that the board is making and impacting the state legislatively. So I think it's a win for you all for this year, and I definitely just wanted to highlight, we'll continue to bring you those information points so that you can advocate for the best for Oakland.
Director Barry.
Yeah,
Director
what you
Barry.
just what you just said, just to say something I've said twice already today, it reinforces the idea for me that it's really important that we have a strong relationship with the city, right? I feel like, and the county, East Bay Recs, Parks and Rec, like, if communities are using OUSD property for community use, then what should the investment be? What should the partnership look like? So that we're not carrying it all on our own. The other thing I wanted to say, I totally forgot. Did I write it down? Yes, because you mentioned bathrooms. So I came today prepared because it was the last facilities meeting of the year before summer. I got so many messages between January and May about the bathrooms in my district. And I feel like my question is, do we have a set of principles that define the floor? Like the basic, quality of facilities that we guarantee our students will walk into in August. And I want to know where bathrooms, because we hear it from our student directors, it comes up in their surveys all the time, right? And we saw it today earlier in the presentation, and I just feel like, what's the plan? Will the bathrooms be ready for students in August? But also just more broadly, what are the set of conditions that we guarantee students and teachers, and families every year? And then, how can we help manage that process so there's some level of transparency around how we address it and maintain it?
I can respond, or we can just let it sit, because it is an important, it has been, I've been hearing it for a long time. I'll tell you, it costs between $250,000 to $400,000 to address every bathroom issue. One of the biggest things that is when social media started blowing up around TikTok and all those different challenges that were in bathrooms, I don't think we've fully recovered from all of that, right? Oh, you don't? Oh, well. There were a lot of challenges where you would try to steal the toilet paper rack and rip it off the wall, right? And destroy toilets and things like that. One of the things that is happening through the summer is the CowSHAPE grant that we're doing is repairing and replacing a lot of the fixtures. It's around water efficiency, but we are going through and doing that. But it is a big issue, and you're seeing it show up in the data as well. So it doesn't surprise me that when you're talking about the things that you're hearing through email, it's also something that's showing up in the surveys around just the overall condition of our restrooms and condition of our facilities and creating safe spaces. One of the things that I will say that I'm really excited about as we move forward with the rebuilding and redesign of schools, one of the things that we're considering in future projects is private restrooms, where you're not having groups of kids in restrooms, but every student has their own restroom that they can go into. And so there's a cost to that. You can't do it with the older facilities, but there are things that we're looking forward to. But there is a pretty significant cost. If the deferred maintenance budget was higher, we could do more to address some of those. But these are the trade-offs that the board has, and it's been kind of a theme tonight from some of the questions in each one of the items, that it is a financial question, and we're happy to engage in it, because it is a place where I definitely have heard stories of lots of kids that really struggle with kind of the restroom environments at school sites. I know we have a lot of items, so.
No, it's fine. I'm raising my own hand to allow me to speak, which is funny. But I was actually just going to say that example of CCPA and their individual bathrooms, and had a whole thing that I was going to talk to about that. But it's all good. We'll just move on. Director Thompson, did you have anything to add? Yeah. Yeah.
Just a quick thing. If you look at the footnote, it talks about ELOC, but it says kitchen. That kitchen infrastructure and training. So that's
good catch.
But
that is not.
I just
expanded learning opportunities program.
Expanded learning opportunity. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
No,
last.
no, no, right here in the legend.
Yeah, in the legend, yeah, yeah. And the last thing is, I noticed deferred maintenance talks about painting of 2 buildings, and then there's a roof. I understand the importance of a roof, but then I'm wondering, how do we prioritize the painting of the 2 buildings?
Yep.
I mean, I'm not gonna argue about it because Acorn Woodland got painted, so I'm not, but I'm just curious.
No, I think that's a great question, because I went to the school site and I was like, really? Is it, if you've been there, it doesn't look, the roof and the painting is the envelope of the building. And one of the things that we're seeing right now, we're actually addressing this at the Highland CDC, when you keep patching these things and you don't get them and it gets into the wall, the expenses of that increase rapidly. So when we went, and the paint shop walked me through the site and showed me that where it was that it needed to be addressed. Once you start getting water in your walls, you get mold issues. It starts degrading the interior of that wall, and the cost goes up exponentially. So one of the things that we are trying to do is prioritize roofs and painting the exterior of buildings to ensure that, because you're also caulking, you're also making sure that those things happen, so that the deferred maintenance budget doesn't increase rapidly in those areas. So it's a good catch. That is why we're moving forward around it. We're also using Fund 40 to address Prescott, and Prescott's going to have new paint on the exterior of the building, because that is your first line of defense for that building itself.
Thank you.
And
So
just to kind of, if it's okay, just because I think it's important on both of those last 2 questions to understand that, just if you all think of it in general, you understand that we have the several $billion in need, right? And so whichever scope you pick, whether it be painting, roofing, bathrooms, et cetera, we just outright don't have enough funds to keep up with the work that's needed to be done. So what this list kind of represents is, for this summer, kind of the prioritized sites that are getting this work done. I do want to answer the member's question about, do we have a standard for our restrooms? And we do. A lot of times when the year first starts, they're in the best possible condition that you'll see them in. But then, to Preston's point, throughout the course of the year, if you already were starting at a deficit in terms of that restroom not being, brand new, let's say, it is going to run into issues throughout the year. And I would say for people that are questioning you throughout the year, when you get the emails, like I stated a second ago, this is what a lot of the different needs that are at the campuses. So I just wanted to add that for context in terms of how and why some of the work is happening, and why, some things remain.
yeah, and I remember the thing that I was going to say. I think especially the bathrooms, that individual bathroom situation that we're going to have at CCPA, I think it also gets to a safety issue that we've had in bathrooms. And so I think those are all different ways that we can and should be tackling safety, and not in just like different out of the box kind of ways. And I would like to, because I did see some questioning in our administrators and like, how would that actually work? And so I think showing them that video that one of your staff have, because I think, again, as like bathroom management and just management of a site in general, I think folks are going to need to understand like a little bit, it's going to be a little different in a good way, right? But just kind of having folks be able to visualize that. All right, so let's move on to public comment. Anybody for public comment on this agenda item, Mr. Hollis?
Asada Olukbala.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Asada.
It would have been good to see the scope of work going on in the summer in total by districts. I was trying to count each district, and I do see some districts have a little bit more work. Then the list of schools that needed work, and it's not happening because everybody's not being served. And just to make sure you can have the option of saying, well, this project is not happening, and I think it needs to be addressed, and why wasn't it addressed? You should have that conversation. You should have the ability, whatever they bring to you, you should be able to say, I have another point of concern that hasn't been addressed in my district, and I need to have it addressed. As it relates to the McClymonds High School, you can observe the fact that they are doing the kitchen renovation and modernization, and it wasn't an original scope of work. The field wasn't in the original scope of work for the modernization. Now, these are crucial areas of need that weren't identified in the original modernization plan. So they have here for the field, which I'm still confused about what they're doing, the project, John, in a little bitty small print, the project design phase is where they are with the field, being prepared for construction in Q3. That's July, August, and September. I have no clear idea if we're going to address properly the contaminated soil. And even the original scope of work for the football area was the grandstand and the bathroom. And what's broken or needed, the field, the scoreboard doesn't work, and the intercom system doesn't work. So we're going to halfway do this, the totality of what needs to be done. I'm still waiting to hear, what are you doing about the contaminated soil at McClymonds? Hello? He can't talk to me. You have to ask him. That's the way it works. But my main point is, many issues that needed to be addressed in the modernization weren't addressed. If we wouldn't have came forward about that field, it probably, and it says something in the, well, I'll deal with that with another time, because my time, tell me when my time's up.
Thank you, Mrs. Sada. The time just got up for me to be able to tell you. So yeah, there are a couple of field turfs that we're doing. Can you just quickly talk about any sort of the question that she had?
I'm sorry I missed most of the question, but I think it is about the testing that's happening in the field. Yeah, yeah.
No, it wasn't about the testing. It was about how you're going to deal with the contaminated soil.
Got it. Okay.
You can do testing. I know the soil is contaminated.
Right. So there's two sides, like in terms of the process that we're moving forward with all of the fields, but specifically the fields at McClymonds that we're talking about, there are going to be soil tests that are done to figure out what the contaminants are. And we know that the history of that, in the feasibility study, there was the environmental impact, the first phase of that. We know there's a history of businesses that were in that area that could have contaminated. And we know from the TCE and some of the other things that have been in the groundwater that there's going to be issues at that site. We are going to do the testing, and there will be a remediation plan that happens based on work with the DTSC. It may delay the project and slow it down a little bit because you do have to deal with those contaminants. And we'll find out that as we go through the process, and we're creating a process to engage with, and was just talking to the principal about how to send that information out. One of the things that we're doing, and I talked about it a little bit earlier in the spending plan, that whenever projects are, one of the things that we don't want to do is pivot and on projects and have to take back things, right? So when we come under budget on projects, we have been putting some of that money into a soils contingency so that if there is an additional cost, an additional need to address the issues that are happening because of contaminated soils at any of our school sites, there's a bucket that we can immediately turn to with the board and say, here's the money that we can dedicate towards this. What you find in that testing determines how you have to take care of it, right? Some levels of soil contamination can be dealt with relatively inexpensively by removing the dirt and processing it in particular locations. Some is more complex and requires more remediation and may not even be able to be, you may not be able to even take care of that in the state of California. It has to be shipped out. So like we are going to do our due diligence around the soil contamination that exists at McClymonds. We know there's a history of it. We don't know specifically what's there. We do have the historical background, and we will be taking care of that. So that work is ongoing this summer. And so even though we may be moving forward on the design for fields, and we are moving forward with the procurement of the turf itself. We won't be able to install it until we've satisfied the DTSC, the Department of Toxic Substances, and I don't know what the C is, contaminant? Yeah, and we have a long history of working with them around these projects, and then it does have to go to DSA as well.
Thank you. All right, now
Substance.
moving to item, we got 3 more items to go. So D2 25-1678, which is the Garfield Elementary School Measure Y bond modernization. Do we have a quick presentation for this item?
We do.
David, go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, from a time standpoint, I'll try to move us along. We have a team of folks who are going to help present this particular item. I think it's a very timely item based on a lot of the conversation that we've been having this evening about master plans and things that happen, information that we receive. And so this Garfield project was one that was previously approved. It was going to be a modernization to the site, primarily due to a lot of the structural issues and the seismic concerns at the site. We have launched the project, and the reason why we're pausing and we're bringing this particular project to you all this evening is a lot of it is lesson learned from years past in trying to do projects. We're at a critical juncture in this particular project of identifying a lot of challenges that we're running into from a budget standpoint, as well as just the overall what is going on with that building. And so because we have a presentation, what I'll do is I'll kind of turn it over to the team to walk you through what some of those challenges are. And then that way we'll be available for any line of questioning. So I'll save some time for us to have questions. So Aaron, I think I'm going to turn it over to you to walk through some of what the various challenges and so forth are.
Thanks, David. And can you guys hear me okay? Good.
Yes.
All right. So I'm Aaron Jobson from Quattroki Architects. We're the designer for Garfield, and I had the pleasure of working with the team over the last year or so working on this project. And I think if you guys want to go ahead and just advance to slide 8, we can probably start there and move this along. So we thought we'd just give a quick overview of some of the challenges with, if you can go back one, there you go. Some of the challenges we've faced with this project as we've gone through it. And there's kind of 4 main ones that we'll talk about quickly. So the first one is structural rehabilitation. So David mentioned that already, but we are doing enough modernization work on this project that it triggers a mandatory seismic upgrade, meaning that we have to bring the project up to current code. And that is requiring pretty extensive work to the concrete shear walls, to some of the wood framing, and also to some of even the foundations, where we have to install new shear walls with new foundations with micro piles underneath them because there are some soil issues on this site as well. And that means really reconstructing the building to a great extent, and that has increased in scope as we've gone through the design, and there's significant potential for it to increase further as we go further into design and into construction. So that's one big area. Next. The second is the temporary housing. Because of the extent of that structural rehabilitation, we really need to do the whole project and modernize the whole school at once. And it will take more than 1 school year to do that. And so we have looked at a number of different options, in particular a plan for temporary housing, but that involves bringing 30 portables for classrooms, plus additional spaces for support spaces for admin, kitchen serving, and restrooms onto the site, and taking up really all of the field area and most of the blacktop area with that temporary housing. And there's a significant cost associated with that, because there needs to be grading and utility work done in preparation for that housing, as well as leasing and installing the portables, and then taking that all away at the end of the project. And so that's money that doesn't, in the end of the day, have a tangible benefit to the community. Next. The third constraint is that even with doing all that, there are some areas where we can't fully meet the educational specifications that were mentioned earlier in the master plan presentation, that we really can't bring everything up to that kind of full level of educational adequacy that was discussed earlier. So some key areas that don't meet that, the multipurpose room, just the structure of that and the way it was built in 2 phases over time don't allow for enough height for it to ever be used for athletics, really. We can't meet all of the pre-K, TK, and kinder classroom requirements for space and access to restrooms. We have limited space for a dedicated TKK play area. And then not all the classrooms meet the recommended size. So a lot of the classrooms end up at about 860 square feet instead of the 960 to 1,000 that we want. The library also doesn't meet that standard. So even with all of this investment in the facility, we're still really not able to get everything all the way up to where we want it to be at that top level. Next. And in addition to that, there are also some areas of scope that we couldn't fully address in the modernization. So things like replacing the existing windows, we'd like to be able to do that, but we're trying to control the budget and weren't able to do that. So they were just going to be repainted, similar with skylights and some of the light control louvers on the interior of the classrooms. And we weren't really able to do anything to the outside of the building other than repaint it. So at the end of all of this, from the exterior, the school would really look pretty similar to that it does now. It would be refreshed and repainted, but really be the same school, even despite the limited amount or the extensive amount of investment that the board had put into it. And then one of the things we were really trying to do is there's a slightly newer building, Building B, on the campus, and that has very limited windows. And we were able to add a little bit of more windows in there, but the structural limitations will limit the amount of that. So we don't meet the targets that we really would want for the amount of windows and daylighting within those classrooms. Next. So you can see kind of a budget summary here for that and how learning all of this and adding this scope to the project has increased that budget over time, and that we really are spending a significant amount of money on this project for the modernization. And I think that kind of led us to this point of inflection. And I think, Preston, you were going to pick it up from here.
I think we're at a point in the design, and I really want to appreciate the team on the call, David, I think John Esposito, Aaron, and the team at SKA, like really just calling the question around the structural issues and essentially some of the interim housing and the different things that means. Most of the money that you would be investing in is a very old building to just shore it up, but you wouldn't have all the new features that a normal new construction would be. So what we've invited them to do is to look at what would the cost be for full new construction of that building so that you would actually have a new school and a replacement of the old building rather than dealing with all the structural issues, so that the board can make a decision on whether or not they wanted to pivot from a modernization to a full rebuild of the site. And so what you're seeing on this slide, and they'll be working on this, is what would new construction look like? And I wanted to add one thing. We have submitted a proposal for OCI funding for Oakland Children's Initiative, because this property was not going to eat, like, remember, and this is some of the timeline and why planning is so critical, was not going to add TK classrooms to this. So it would still not have TK other than the one classroom that's there, and it would not have pre-K extended services at the school site. So what we've asked for them to do, and moving forward, is what would it cost, and we expect to have this when we return in August, what would it cost to do a full rebuild of the school, and including additional pre-K, TK spaces so that you actually have a full program at that school rather than just having a few classes, one pre-K class, one TK class, and then going into kindergarten. So right now we're at the phase where the structural issues are so much more significant than we originally anticipated. And this was in the master plan. It was a known issue. This isn't a surprise, but it is the realities now that we've gone in, we've done some of the pre-construction services, the architects have understood what it would take to shore up that building, that the cost is going to keep increasing for that building. And so we just wanted to, let you know as soon as we found out, and then we will be engaging with the school community when they come back, but also wanted to let you know that we are exploring an option for new construction and we're hoping that it will land within a range that is within reach of the district around the current funds that we have. But we'll know that when we come back. And so I just wanted to kind of share that with you all. And then kind of the next steps here. We did take the project team. Was I supposed to do this one too? Okay, good. Okay. We have looked at some other districts. Martinez has done some interesting things around modular building to reduce the cost of projects. So we went and we've learned from them, met with their design teams. We went and visited Fremont, that has some new construction that they've done that's more, it's a cost-efficient approach that QKA has worked on with before. And we looked at some modular buildings in Milpitas in their new schools that they've been developing. They're gonna evaluate the potential campus replacement scenarios, utilizing some of the lessons learned from those other districts that were budget constrained, to bring those forward to us. Swinnerton, one of the advantages of having already a contractor involved is that they're providing cost and schedule inputs on this, so we would understand what that would do in terms of the constructability. And then we'll provide recommendations to the facilities committee and the board based on budget, schedule, and constructability options when we come back in the fall. So it's just an update, but it's a pretty significant update that we wanted to make sure that you were aware of and had an opportunity to ask any questions. The memo is also pretty good, giving you the history of it as well.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I fully understand this slide. Yes, so the original project as it's set already in Measure Y is for 56.7 million, and that's for modernization. If we are to address all of the issues that we have found currently, not future issues that we may find even as we continue, then the modernization for that building would be 70.7 million.
You're close. That's what we asked the board based on what we were seeing in schematic design.
Okay.
We have increased the budget to 70.7 million. What the current estimate is at 72.4 million.
Okay.
So you're already over what has been allocated in the current estimate that's been given out, knowing the new information that we have.
Oh, the 70 is the current okay.
The 70 is the current budget
Okay.
that happened in the last spending plan in March. However, right now, we're looking at 72.4 million in the current budget for the project.
And then the last column would be if we said, we're not doing all of that, we're gonna just reconstruct a whole new building, including TK, including some of these other additional factors that we've talked about. And that's why it's all TBD, because we're still making those assessments, and those will be brought to us in August before anything moves forward. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Aaron, did I get that right? Can you just?
Yeah, no, you got that exactly right. Yeah, that's correct. And the only thing I would add is just, and I think we emphasized this already, is that the way the structural rehabilitation process goes with DSA, there's significant risk that the scope will increase there later in approval and construction too. So I would say it's sort of like at least 72.5 million.
Mm-hmm. And I think we also, I want to also understand timeline. So if we are to do this modernization for 72 million, you said it's going to take, how long would it take? Is that over multiple school years? Is that right?
Yes. Do you want to talk about, timeline?
And then what about like completely new construction?
So for completely new construction, the construction timeline is the same or potentially even shorter, because it's actually, in some cases, with the level of modernization that we're doing and reconstructing concrete shear walls and foundations within an existing building is a little bit more complicated than actually building a building from scratch. So we'll have to kind of restart design, so we'll lose a little bit of time in that way, but it shouldn't have a huge impact in the overall project schedule if we can make decisions and move forward relatively timely.
But there will probably also be a demolition cost that's not.
There will be, and that'll be something that we'll account for as we develop those updated numbers, is also the demolition cost.
Yeah, and if that could just be a specific line item as well, like you have the temporary housing and the other modernization for August, that'd be great. Board colleagues, any questions that you all have? Director Thompson?
My only question was, isn't there a specific mandate by the state to have, that's what I thought.
There is specific guidance, the 50% of the ruling that if the overall construction costs go over 50% of the replacement costs, the state does recommend that you move towards a rebuild versus a modernization. You get an absolute star for having that piece of information. That was great. And so that's where we are right now, right? And it does, as Aaron talked about, it does trigger a lot from the DSA. And one of the things that I would just bring in, there is something that is really uncomfortable about like adding, and this goes to the sustainability policy, and actually one of the next items that we'll be talking about. You have an old building that now has HVAC in it with single pane windows that are old and lacking modern insulation in the walls. There is going to be an energy cost to providing the comfort without doing the whole envelope of the building in a certain way. And so these are some of the trade-offs that the team has been talking about and then bringing back to us as trade-offs. And I would say like the level of discourse that we've had has been really deep around, and I also want to bring it back to a question that you asked about the 3 Rs resolution and the footprint specifically. You are making a long-term investment in this corner of Oakland for the next 50 years with this building, right? If it's a new building. And so like just to be thinking about the enrollment factors, the density in those areas, the charter, like all the questions that you've been asking should be also in the back of your mind around projects like this, because this is a long, Oh, okay, great. I headed it off.
Right, any other questions, comments? All right, more to come. Mr. Hollis, any public comment on this agenda item?
Lasara Olakbala.
Just trying to find on the map where Garfield is.
It's right off of 23rd in District 2.
It's, okay.
Yeah.
And the reason why, at some point, we're gonna have to merge schools. You got 22 schools with less than 300 students. So is Garfield in an area where we have a low enrollment school in existence? Because if that is the case, building a new school when we can move students. Now I see that they have 483 students at Garfield, which is a pretty substantial school. So that was one point. Can we not, we don't have money to build a whole new school, y'all. I'm sorry. If y'all know something I don't know, share with me. Because every school is, schools are not getting any service. And we're looking at service in Garfield, but we got schools not getting anything. Then we have Garfield under the lease back method. If Garfield was under the design bid method or the progressive method, would that make a difference in pricing to the point where you would save money, or it doesn't make a difference at all what delivery method is being used? Currently, the method being used is lease back. And lastly, I forgot my last point. Come on, 80 years old lady. But the most important thing is the timeline for doing this, and if you have to move these kids for demolition of where they're gonna go, 483, and are you projecting this school is gonna be growing in the future, hopefully? I just don't know. But I wanna give you a compliment. It looks like you have been able to identify significantly the issues that have to be addressed at this school. And that's good. And so you start the process, and then all of a sudden you find out, like we found out at Cole with the soil contamination into the project, and other things came up. The advantage is, it looks like you have a very clear picture of what you need to address for this school.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I think that is a good question about the design method, or the build method, design build. Delivery method, thank you. Can you answer that?
Yeah, no, probably think we're one of the few districts that we ever get to talk about this, so I'm super excited about this. It's a great question. I want to go back to like some of the other projects that I've run over. At that time, the district was utilizing a methodology that was design, bid, and then build. And when you have a project like Cole, where you use design, bid, and then you build it, when things come up, there are an expectation around, and there were some contractual issues with that site, that you do get a lot of change orders. One of the advantages of both design bid, like the design build entity that is together in a progressive design build structure, or a leaseback, is you get the architect and you get the contractor together so that they are doing their due diligence and they're doing their analysis of the site. And one of the things that you saw in one of these slides is that you see the contractor is involved early to start doing some of the pre-constructive services to understand what these structural issues are so that you're not blindsided by it, because you wouldn't have known that if you'd used a different methodology. So one of the things that we are using in Oakland right now around most of our projects is either progressive design build, which does bring the entity together, the design build entity, to do this level of analysis so that you figure it out early so that you can plan for it so you're not doing it on the backside. Because when you do change orders, you pay more for change orders, right? So if you identify it now, even if we decide to go with a newer building or whatever it is, you'll know up front what the depth of those issues are. So it's a great question, and that's where the leaseback structure that we're using here is working at its best to give the district the best information so that we make sound decisions for the future of that building and that community.
So I guess one of my last questions around this is, when do we need to make, like, it sounds like the decision is clear and there's more information to be had before we make a decision. When do we actually need to make this decision?
Yeah. So, yeah, you get to enjoy your summer. We'll go off working. This is actually the busiest time. Like, everybody's celebrating the school's out, but like, we're really working hard right now. As we go through the summer months, we will get some options. We'll know more about the building, and we'll also know more about the funding, right? So, we have put in proposals for additional funding to support this project as well. If that is approved, then we come back with a different funding landscape for you all and potential design options. One of the things that they will be exploring is potentially maintaining the current building and using that for interim housing for the students while you build the new site, the new campus, right? Oakland's campuses are incredibly small, right? So you're leveraging the old building to maintain the students while you're building the new school right next to it. It's a very tight campus, but it can be done, and that's what the leaseback entity will be exploring to talk about the constructability and whether that's possible. So we would be coming back in August, and I think we would be making one is like engaging with the community at the school site, because one of the things we have talked to, the principal about, like, what some of the issues are. It wasn't an opportune time because school is already out, but we would come back and re-engage the school to identify the findings as well. CBOC heard an earlier version of this that was a little lighter in terms of, because we had less information then. So we would be coming back in August with a plan and a funding profile of what we think we would need moving forward.
And I guess to the earlier question around like housing students, because I'm a little concerned about the costs of all those portables, regardless of kind of which method we use. Is there a school that is in close proximity to Garfield that could at least take some students or some grouping of students so that we could we don't have to have that high cost for, again, portables?
Yeah, I think that this is actually something that is an important it's an important consideration for us to have around any facility project moving forward, because that cost is essentially a rental cost that you're paying of $8 to $12 million for that interim housing. Many other districts will locate students at other schools. There is capacity nearby to be able to do it, but in respect for the school communities, if we're going to go down that route, I want to definitely focus on the engagement. But one of the things that we do have is we do have enough capacity to hold that school, but the logistics of that are really challenging. The last time that we did do that was at the Glenview project. And definitely the costs of housing the students at Santa Fe during that project and busing them, there were a lot of challenges given the distance that they had to travel, but that is a strategy that lots of districts do to invest more money in the facility rather than in the interim housing that you're doing at the site.
I would also just see if Mr. Bedlatch can give us information as to like if there was any attrition that they saw because of those issues, so that we can have a real full picture as to like what could happen in any scenario. But thank you. Since
Can I add one more, just
Yeah.
one more little thing, because
Sure.
I heard it mentioned, and I just thought of it right now, so I'm sorry. I know we want to move on to the next item. In the facilities master plan, there was that document that showed the density in particular neighborhoods. If you line that up with the map that is up on the wall over there, you'll notice that there's a high density in that neighborhood of 0 to 4-year-olds.
So that's why the pre-K and TK are really important. All right, we had public comment? Yes, we did. Thank you. So we're moving on to D3 25-1272, which is the Measure Y Bond Program Q1 Report, Facilities Planning Management.
This one also stars David Colbert, so I'll turn it over to David.
So this one is just more for you guys to get your eyes on a document that you guys helped in conjunction with the CBOC to report out on the work that we're doing. So this is what you guys used to know as the fact sheet, as the one pager. Now it's the quarterly report. And what we wanted to do is just put your attention to how it has evolved into a broader document from a lot of the feedback that we received from the Bond Oversight Committee. And so it's more just to kind of show you all and even get your input as well on all of the different touch points that we now have as part of this particular report. So it shows overall construction completion. It shows the entire team. It shows the community engagement. It has a Gantt chart about what phase and start dates. It has several notes about what's happening in the planning, in the design, in the construction. It speaks to one of the main things that we continue to hear was when are there going to be cost impacts or schedule changes and change orders and things of that nature. What potential impacts will it have? So just wanted to show you how it is continuing to grow so that you all begin to familiarize yourselves with it. We did present it to Oversight Committee. We do have a few more changes that we're going to work with them on generating for this report. But we just wanted to get it before you so that you begin to know the product that you'll begin seeing when you guys return in August, September timeframe.
David, and if I can just add one thing, this report is Q1 of 2025. So it is a little outdated in terms of where our projects are right now. But like David said, it was just to let you know how this report is looking with all of the information that we're bringing. We also do have our website, which we maintain, again, to reflect this information on a quarterly basis. So the idea was to show you information as of March 30th, 2025, and then in August, bring back more Q2, more updated information.
Thank you, and I really appreciate these. These are a lot more thorough, and I'm glad that CBOC and you all worked together on putting something together that was really helpful. I guess there are projects that I'm seeing that are project completed, but they're at like 98, 99. Can you tell us just a little bit about why those high 90s versus 100?
Yeah, that's the same feedback that they had, and that's one of the things that we're going to continue to work on. So if you notice underneath, it'll have like what phase that the project is in. So, for example, I'm looking at Claremont on my screen. It has that it's at 98% of the current closeout phase, which the project is complete, as you all know. However, there are just some like financial things and some punch list things and closeout items that we still need to do from a contractual standpoint. So it doesn't report as far as the app and how the information is generated in the system. It's not going to show as a 100%. Those are some of the nuances that we're going to work through. CCPA, or Coliseum College Prep Academy, is another example. It's at 21% of the design development phase, right? So it's 21% of the project, but it's 30% of the design development phase. So we agree that this needs to be tweaked a little bit more to have a little bit more clarity. So it's a little bit clearer to folks trying to digest like what these numbers really represent.
And I just want to give a quick shout out for the Kaiser Early Childhood Learning Center that is under budget. I like that. Let's keep that up. So we can, and then remind us, President, that goes into that pool of funding that you mentioned.
Yeah.
If we don't spend it, that goes into that soil.
Yeah. So this is in every revision that we come, because the budget is constantly going to be moving. Costs are going to go up for all the things, but also projects do come in under budget. And what we will do is we're looking at like, and we may not keep building that fund forever, but right now it's, I think, at about $1.3 million. What we'll do is when we close out projects, and we're doing this across all the bond funds, if you look at some of the CBOC reports, they'll hold money. One of the past practices was just to hold money in a project for a long time, even though it's been done for, a decade or whatever. What we're doing is we're now sweeping those funds so that it closes out fully the funding for the project, but it holds it in places that we know that we're going to need it. There's actually commissioning that's happening for Laurel. So like once the building is built and we're using it, there still are issues that come up in the closeout. Laurel is still having some issues around the HVAC system, and they're having a meeting this Friday to look at that. So there is some need. That's why you see a lot of 98%, but like we would then come with a recommendation as to where to put that in the next spending plan. And we're already tracking all of that. It was a great question.
Thank you. And I do see some really joyous faces as well in the projects that have been done. Board colleagues, any questions or comments? Okay. Mr. Hollis, any public comment on this agenda item?
Asada Olukbala.
So just speaking to McClymonds, it's interesting throughout the document where you identify cost per student, and I don't get what that why you have to identify that, because you have here from McClymonds $343,000. Really looks like we're getting a lot of money. I don't understand that. Then we're not going to discuss the community engagement because it's non-existent. I'm a member of the community, and we stopped having meetings some time ago. But the language, and I don't have my glasses, I went through the document. You have language that says you will refresh with new floors. Then you said you're going to do the same thing related to the feel. It will be refresh. And feel and track. The track is not being identified for work as far as I know. It's just the football field. So here you have the track as being refreshed, and that's not actually happening. So the field is not a part of the modernization funding, so you have it in here as if the money is coming from Measure Y, and it's not. So just a few points, but I do hope as we start the new year, we will have full community engagement, updating, with having the meetings of the Project Advisory Committee put back in place. And then lastly, I was told that the field was going to be put down with concrete laid. And see, people at McClymonds are talking about, and this misinformation. So I don't know if that's going on at other schools. But we are going back and forth with an understanding of what's happening with the field and with other aspects of the project. So could we get more clarity for everybody so we know what's really going on at McClymonds, please?
Yeah, I think communication is key, and we heard that at Skyline as well when the magical school board showed up to their campus. So, yeah, I agree with that. And I wonder if that's something that we can expect from the engagement specialist, or would that be, like, who would that fall under, and how can we support them in providing more?
Yeah, I think that is one of the things I just, in terms of communication, it is hard, right? Like, because there's lots of different opinions. And I will say that the track is actually getting addressed at McClymonds, and it is not part of there's 2 increments for the McClymonds project. It is kind of the 3rd investment that we're doing in the field. And it is hard to communicate it out. And one is, I will say that we're not putting cement down, and we're gonna, it is really a state-of-the-art field that we're putting in at McClymonds. And so I think one of the things that we just talked to the principal about, I got an email from her yesterday, is to send out some periodic updates over the summer so that the community is getting update to help support some of the misinformation that might be out there, but then also re-engaging with the community around, like, kind of the construction timelines there at all the school sites, and at different, each community is a little bit different in how they're organized and the structures there, but definitely we see this also as a forward-facing document that the school communities can use, and we want feedback on the language so that the language is accurate and represents what's happening at the school site. And so we do see this as also a recruitment tool. I think one of the things that families want to know is what's the future of that school. And so there's lots of purposes for this, and I'm really excited by the partnership with both CBOC that really this kind of was grounded in, but partnership with the facilities committee around improving this so it suits many people's needs.
Thank you. And I also wonder if there could be, a little Instagram story or something like that that could be added to it. I know that maybe some of the students there would be interested in doing something like that, so that we can get myth versus fact kind of Mythbuster episode. Any other comments, questions, board colleagues? Okay. Final item for tonight is D4 25-1673, which is OUSD Energy Management and Sustainability Update, Facilities Planning Management.
I would love, I'm going to make this presentation because it's near and dear to my heart. One of the things I can't emphasize enough, the power of networking with other districts around the work that they're doing. And while we were going through our sustainability policy and the development of the sustainability policy, I happened to be sitting next to the facilities director at Temecula Unified School District, who has a long track record of saving funding for the district through a really comprehensive energy management program. And so I just want to tell you that, like, some of the ideas here come from, like, conversations with other districts around best practices that they're employing. And one of the things that, if you go back to the sustainability policy, does not include conversations about energy management. And we talked about it a little bit with the Garfield project, and why it's so important, and you'll see this in a second, is that the energy costs that the district is paying come out of the general fund. So, and you'll see some slides. You'll see me integrating some of the CBO's slides into this presentation. So, we've talked about this many times. So a couple of things. There is a board policy, 3511, that does prescribe an energy management policy, and it has not been updated nor implemented in a while. And so we are going to be diving into that, and we would, as the facilities committee develops its work plan for next year, highly would encourage you to push staff to do some revisions around board policy 3511 around energy management. So this is my pitch to you all around your work plan for next year. And really, the energy management enhances the mission of the district through, one, reducing utility spending, right? Which the operating costs, and when you do that, you get to rededicate those funds back into the school system in supporting students, right? Compensation increases. You can add it to the deferred maintenance, wherever you want to put it. It allows you to reinvest that money somewhere else. And our job should be to minimize our energy costs, right, for the district. Also, in alignment with the sustainability policy, it helps us support a greener future for our kids. And and if done right, it does enhance the indoor like conditions within the school. So if you look on the energy management at OUSD and what sustainability is, we've talked about sustainability, we've passed the policy, we're on the implementation. And a huge, Hannah Press is online right now, and she's like one of the people that's been driving this work, and I just want to show her great level of thanks for all the work that she's doing, because like it is important for us to work on this policy level. Board Policy 3511, it was last updated 2 decades ago. I'm going to say that again. It was last updated 2 decades ago. A lot has changed in the universe around energy and energy management in the last 20 years. There were not electrical vehicles there. There was not solar. I don't even, did I have a cell phone then? Oh, I might have. But it was, yeah. So it does have, those are the key components. I'm not going to go over all of them, but like really ask for an action plan around power outages that we experience. Like there's a lot of elements of that policy that we hope to revise and bring back to you all. Here's what I want to get to. If you look at this chart, this is our gas and electricity expenditures from 2018, 2019 to 2024, 2025. And if you look at that, and I'm sorry, it's super small and I cannot see, but I'll look at this right now and I'll tell you the numbers. I just want you to look at the rate in which it's increasing. So we're at 5.8 million pre-pandemic. And right now, and this is, what's that? Oh, I'm sorry. But if you look at where we are currently, and I just want that number for this fiscal year, it's not closed yet. We still have to pay the bill for, like, we still have to pay the bill for May, we still have to pay the bill for June, and then we'll close out this fiscal year. So that was the number as of the time that I put this in terms of what our bill is. So you can see we're at $9.3 million, right? Move forward one slide. And thank you, Corey, for zooming in on it. Helping. Yeah, but I also want you to notice that it's been steadily increasing over time, right? PG&E rates have increased dramatically, and we have Ava Community Energy, which is our partner that does help reduce that cost, but still the directionality of energy costs is going up. Electrification is costing more money around electricity. And then so I will show you that this was a slide from Ms. Grant Dawson in the second interim for this year, predicting based on what they had at the time and looking at that trend, an additional PG&E increase in cost by $2.1 million, right? So when you approve the budget on the 25th, there is something baked into utilities in terms of what those cost projections are going to be, and that is coming from the general fund, right? One of the reasons why staff was recommending us purchase our solar, like build our own solar, remember that is coming from the bond program and completely offsets your energy usage at those school sites. So that's direct savings to the general fund. And there's lots of other ways you can do that. This is the landscape, and this comes out of the sustainability policy. And I just want to show you, we have actively completed all of the things that are in green, right? So that is the utility bill tax refunds, electricity rate contract, that's Ava Energy, formalizing a green revolving fund. We're doing all of those pieces. We have a whole bunch in progress. CowSHAPE around energy efficiency with HVAC. We have energy efficiency audit that the board just approved that we're moving forward with that will come up with lots of ways that we can save money. Solar phase 2, there's just a lot of things there. I put that EV charging pilot in there, and I put it in red for a reason. It may cost you money, right? We are at a loss when we're putting EV in, and there's a few, like 1 or 2 people get to charge their vehicle. There was an incredible cost to provide that service. It is something we should be considering because we want to electrify our fleet over time. Just bought some hybrid vehicles for nutrition services that need charging. Definitely there's solar at the center that can feed into that. But I do want to name that, like, if the board is going to move forward on projects and wants EV charging, that may come at a cost to the district because it may cost more than it actually provides back to the district. That would be more for the common good and for the sustainability that we're moving to EV, but there may be a cost with it. Conceptual on the right side is, you know, kind of these other factors, like there's a heater replacement program that we're looking to engage in that would replace the heaters and use less gas. But so there's a broad range of strategies that we're using that are very complex. And I want to just give Hannah a few seconds to be able to just walk through kind of the detail of some of those projects, and then I think we'll be done for the night. If you have, yeah, so go ahead, Hannah.
Thank you. So as Preston mentioned, we have several key initiatives and projects already underway that meet our energy management strategy. So these represent just some of the in-progress strategies. So starting from the top, we have the CowSHAPE upgrades, which were mentioned earlier this evening, notably the district-wide HVAC assessments, CO2 monitoring installations, and efficient plumbing upgrades. This is actually a grant from the state of $10 million. We have an energy efficiency audit, which is going to identify and implement energy conservation measures across the district. And we are looking to procure funding from the state and federal sources wherever possible for this. We have the solar initiative. So at 23 school sites, we have completed it, and we're looking to expand that already. This generates utility savings directly back into the to the general fund. And we have the opportunity to sell solar renewable energy credits, which becomes revenue for the district at that point. And we are excited about piloting a new project at 21 school sites, replacing gas water heaters with electric heat pumps or on-demand units, so reducing our natural gas usage across the district. And we are developing a energy and utilities management dashboard so we can easily identify utility savings opportunities and track our progress against our goals and enable transparency with the community. Moving forward, we have our completed projects as well on the next slide. So just to give more context to these, we have our sustainability policy, which was just passed this past March, and we're developing an implementation plan for this policy, which outlines actions and strategies and projects that will put this policy into action. We have the electricity rate that provides a more renewable grid mix of electricity to the district at a lower rate than PG&E. So again, generating more utility savings back to the general fund. We've formalized a green revolving fund, so we are reusing savings from past projects from the savings we've accrued and can reinvest this elsewhere. And we have a climate action roadmap, so we're defining and reporting on our progress as we plan these projects, and an energy baseline so we can set and track our targets. All of these projects support the energy management overarching goal, which is lowering costs and emissions and improving campus conditions. So we're very excited about these, and I'll pass it back to you, Preston.
Thank you, Hannah. There are some pro tips here on summer conservation around things that we can do in our classrooms, and this is one of the areas that Temecula actually implements within their policy, that they go through, and all of these things get disconnected during the summer, and they have staff dedicated to it, so that saves tremendous amount of money. And happy to talk more about that as we get into some of the policy work. And just a couple of next steps that I just want to lift up before we open it up to questions is, one, I cannot emphasize enough how important the facilities master plan is around the building system, around electrical building systems. If the state is moving in the direction towards energy, moving away from gas and moving to full electrification, it's not just the fact that you want to do it, you have to have the infrastructure to be able to do that. And there are many of our schools that have 60-year-old electrical infrastructure that just can't support kind of the modern upgrades that we're expecting. So one, just look for that in the facilities master plan. We would like to, we work at the pleasure of the board, but your space is policy. We would love to work with you on updating that policy and hope it's part of your plan, but we what are the best practices that complement the sustainability plan? And then, continue to schedule routine maintenance checks that are ongoing for like replacing inefficient appliances, fixtures, lighting, and the CowSHAPE work will continue on over the summer. One thing that's not here that I do want to say, we are kind of at a crossroads around our lighting in our schools. And the district is really behind on switching away from fluorescent to LED. And one of the things that has happened, we have stockpiled a lot of fluorescent bulbs this year so that we'll be able to address that. But you do have an issue where we may not be able to get fluorescent bulbs into the future because they've been outlawed for schools by the state of California, and we will be forced to switch over to LED. There's good news on this, is that energy audit that they're doing that we talked about that is going to be an investment grade audit, this is one of the areas that they'll be looking at and providing strategies. And there is funding in the bond to address the electrical systems, but I do want to flag that for you as like kind of an issue, that kind of this outdated infrastructure, like when you delay some of these deferred maintenance or when the state's moving in a direction around energy management and getting rid of certain technology, the district needs to be paying attention to that. And that's why, really excited that Pranita is the director of planning for the facilities department. We have a planning wing now so that you're staying ahead of these things and we have this information bringing it forward. So anyway, that's our presentation. Sorry, it's my passion that when we're doing the sustainability plan, but I know how hard the financial decisions that you all have to make. And I just wanted to flag that there is kind of a silver lining in all this if we can get ahead of it. So with that, I'll turn it over to you all if you have questions, but I know it is late.
I would just say super quickly, I think there is a need to like educate staff as to what energy savings we get when we do these steps. Because I know many educators have either freezers or refrigerators in their classrooms. Also some fans and other things to keep the environment cool. So just really having a clear understanding, and that could be like, in the checklist of you checking out of your classroom, have these things happened. I would also say any of like the ideas around having like just a shut off switch of the whole building is a good idea. I also would caution us though in making sure that whoever has the access to the switching it off, there is also access to switch it back on, because if there's an emergency situation in which we have to move, summer programming, or there is something that happens that we need to quickly open up a school site, I would hate for us to not be able to do so because we aren't able to actually turn everything back on. Any other comments from board colleagues? Okay. All right. Any public comment?
Lasada Olagbala.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. And that adjourns the meeting. Ms. Lasada is not in the room anymore, so that's why that adjourns the meeting for the facilities committee for this school year. Thank you.